7 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. Can we stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Move the roll call, please.
Catherine Ailing.
Here.
Adam DeYoung.
Here.
Megan Doyle.
Here.
Andrew Fowler.
Here.
Tracy Irby.
Here.
Emily McDonough Souza.
Here.
Luna Petrosky.
Here.
Betsy Ratner.
Here.
Cindy Wolf Boynton.
She's excused.
And Susan Glennon.
Also excused.
8 members present.
Thank you. I think the first order of business is for you, Mr. Riccicelli.
Yes, good evening, Ms. Glennon, members of the board. It's a pleasure to come to you tonight. Well, we have the transportation report, but we do have another piece of business before that. I apologize. As the board knows, the city approved money for through the capital improvement plan for the replacement of the front high school roof. As part of the process for filing an application with the state for state reimbursement, the board is required to approve the educational specifications which are included in your package. It's somewhat of a formality. It's somewhat of a form that the educational specifications have to be filled out, but we respectfully request your approval of the ed specs so that we can apply to the state or start an application to the state for reimbursement on that project.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion. Mr. Fowler?
I motion that the Milford Board of Education approve the educational specifications for the partial roof replacement project at Joseph A. Foreign High School and authorize the superintendent to apply for state reimbursement from the State of Connecticut Department of Administrative Services, Office of School Construction Grants and Review.
Anybody second?
I second.
Thank you, Ms. Ratner, seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. And now the transportation report. As the board knows, each October we come to you and we give you an update on the transportation system. As you know, it's a huge undertaking to transport so many students on a daily basis, and so the board traditionally likes to get an update. So that's what we're here to do tonight. Tonight, though, the board has expressed interest in the past with regard to electric buses. So in addition to Neil Martino, who you know, who's the general manager of Durham Milford, also with us tonight is Nick Boissard, who is the Senior Director of Electric Vehicles North America for Durham. So he has a report to give to you tonight regarding electric buses. But I'll just run quickly through the transportation report, and then we will turn it over to Nick. So your transportation policy, P3541, states that we will provide safe, adequate, efficient, and economical transportation for students in accordance with all federal and state laws and regulations. On Milford Public Schools this year, our numbers so far, we transport 3,980 students on a daily basis, 14 public schools, 3 parochial schools, 4 technical, vocational, magnet schools, which we're required to transport by law. And we also have a large in and out of district special education placement program. We utilize, for this year, 62 buses and vans, 40 for regular ed and 22 for special ed, 109 bus runs, and 967 bus stops. The review that I'm going to give you tonight is for the regular education transportation. The special education transportation is handled by Mr. Brown in the PPS department, and that's on an individualized basis. So tonight's review is for regular transportation only. So as the board knows, our contractor to provide school transportation services is Durham School Services. We've had an excellent relationship with Durham for many years now. They give us very personalized and customized service, a strict proven safety record, very competitive pricing, and they always participate with us in evacuation drills annually. One thing I have in bold letters there because as the board knows, the past couple of years during the pandemic, many school districts throughout Connecticut and throughout the nation have experienced shortages of bus drivers and interruptions in service. We've been very lucky, and that's due to some very proactive things that Durham has done. Neil went out and kind of with the crystal ball said we need to hire some more drivers. So prior to the shortages even happening, Durham was looking for drivers and getting them licensed so that when we came back and when things were looking not so good in other districts, we had enough drivers, and so we're grateful for the actions that you took, Neil, and Durham as a corporation. Thank you. I just give you the cost per bus per year. I do that annually. It's our contract with Durham is a 3% increase per year. So those figures they recognize that 3% increase. COVID-19 and transportation, the past 2 years, that's all we've talked about. And thankfully, this year there are no longer pandemic protocols on the buses. We do, one of the good things that came out of the pandemic, I suppose, if you could say that there was anything that was good, is that we, during that time, we needed to automate our attendance system on the buses. So we did that with cooperation from Durham, and so now we have an automated attendance system that we're able to track attendance on a daily basis automatically through a student swipe card system. I always mention the school hours, not for any other reason except to bring to your attention that there's a 40-minute window between levels. And that 40 minutes is very important to the transportation system. It directly affects the efficiency of the system because the number of students that we can pick up on a particular bus is driven by how much time there is for the bus to get from one level, high school to middle school, and then middle school to elementary school. So we used to have 30 minutes and we were a lot less efficient than we are now. When the school hours changed several years ago and we went to 40 minutes, we were able to put more students on the bus because we had more time to pick up more students in that 40-minute window. So I always bring that up because that controls the efficiency of the transportation system. Your walking distance guidelines in the policy. High schools are 1.5 miles, middle schools are 1 mile, and elementary schools are 1 mile. In the policy, it defines what a hazardous condition is, so that if a student lives within that walking distance, but if there's a hazardous condition that exists, in accordance with the safety regulations that are in the policy that follow DOT's regulations, then students may still be eligible for transportation even though they live within these miles. So there's a very comprehensive description and definition of what hazardous conditions are. If a student is not eligible for transportation, your board has adopted an opt-in program where they can apply to get onto a bus where there's a seat available and where the bus does not have to deviate from its normal route and from the existing stops that there are. We usually look at and audit the number of students that are on the bus, and then if we determine that there's enough seats on that bus, a student that applies to opt in is granted a seat on that bus. The only condition is they need to get to an existing bus stop. We don't create a new stop for them. That has been very popular with people. And, well, the slide didn't come out very good, I apologize. But in your package are the numbers of the students that opt in this year or have opted in. Up to this point, there are 63 students who have opted in. That most likely will increase throughout the year as more students either move into the district or become aware of the program. We do our best to make sure that everybody knows about the opt-in program, but throughout the year it tends to jump up. And I always compare to previous years. So in 21-22, there were only 59 students and 45 at the time of this report. That was probably largely due to COVID and less people getting on the bus and more parents driving them. And then back in 19-20, prior to the pandemic, we had 82 students total at the end of the school year who opted into the program. So that's been very a popular thing for students who were previously not eligible for transportation. So the next few slides are a lot of numbers. The graphs probably show you a little bit more than they do, but this just breaks it down, and you can look at them at your leisure with the report that you have. The number of students that are bused per grade level. And this is just a graph historically from 2011 to today. As you can see, there was a dramatic drop. There's a lot of reasons for that, and I'm not going to go into them in the interest of brevity tonight, but we've listed those at the bottom, some of the reasons why it dropped off so dramatically, not to mention the decline in enrollment. But as you can see, since the 2017-18 school year, when we changed those start times, that was the last major change that was made to the transportation system, and you can see it's been fairly level since then, and maybe even a little uptick this year. That's probably due to more students riding the bus after the pandemic for this year. Number of bus stops, it follows the trend. You can see how it dropped off dramatically and then it has stabilized since then. The number of bus runs per level, same thing. Again, I'm not going to go through each slide, but if you have any questions, by all means ask. And after you read it at home, if you have any questions, just please let us know. The number of bus runs, again, you can see that. Fuel costs, this is something that's on everybody's mind. Per our contract with Durham, Durham pays the first dollar of fuel, whether it be diesel or gasoline. In 2014, Durham installed a tank at their facility, their previous facility that was on Old Gate Lane, and what that allowed us to do was have a locked-in price for diesel and gasoline from the city. A number of things have happened since then. One is Durham's moving, and for the past year and a half, I would say maybe 2 years, 2 years, they have not had a tank they've been renting space at the Connecticut Post Mall, but their yard on Plains Road is just about ready, and there is a fuel tank that we'll be able to use again. So we'll be able to go back to purchasing fuel on a wholesale basis as opposed to what we're doing now, which is on a retail basis. The district is still not seeing the burden on that because Durham, in addition to the $1 per gallon, is still paying the difference between what the city's price is and what they're paying at the retail pumps. So we're making that adjustment. But there's a dramatic increase in the price of fuel, as we talked about at budget time last year and at the end of the year, just because of the market instability that we've seen over the past year. So when Durham gets their tank back up, and when it's strategic, we'll work with the city to try and lock in a price for the future, where we'll be able to stabilize some of the dollars that we're spending on fuel. But right now, we're pretty much paying for what the market is bearing out right now. I just gave you the historical fuel prices, and you can see the huge difference from 2020, 2021 to where we are now at 409 and 377. You can see though, it's still down slightly from 21, 22. So we're hoping, like everyone else in the nation, that things start to stabilize a little bit, and we'll be able to get back on that, a locked-in price. And this is just another graph of the fuel prices over the past 10 plus years. And this year, we're off to a smooth start. There's always a few little snags the first few days, the first couple of weeks, but we deal with those on an individual basis, and Durham is always extremely responsive to anything that comes up. So smooth start so far. We're pleased to report. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick that's the second package that you have there regarding clean buses. Oh, yes. If there's any questions, let me call for questions.
Yeah, no,
first on the
please.
report.
Ms. White?
Thank you. So it's great to see that the attendance is going up on the buses. How have we noticed the number of students who've been dropped off by their parents and compared to taking the school buses, and what are the general reasons that they are not choosing to use buses if they are available? Like if they're on a route but not choosing to?
It was easy to say during the pandemic why they were not riding the buses. But prior to that, each year we do ridership audits, and ridership, the number of students that are eligible is considerably down. The number of students that ride the bus is considerably down. There are some factors, especially at the high school and the middle school level, with the seasons. So there's sports seasons, there's some seasons where they're doing drama clubs and things like that. So that affects how many students take the bus at the end of the day. To be honest with you, we don't have any reasons why, except that I think some parents just feel more comfortable in dropping their students off. The other thing is, and it's probably obvious, is on inclement weather days, more parents drop their students off. But it is positive, like you said, this year we're seeing more students on the bus than we did over the past 2 years at least. But we encourage people all the time because there's so much congestion around the schools. We've had to do traffic safety improvements around the schools because of the wide increase in the number of parents driving. So can't really give you a good answer.
Okay. And then similar, but do the middle schools still have late buses?
Yes.
Anybody else? Ms. Ryder?
Thank you. It's just a technicality of questions that relating to the opting. When people opt, is it mostly because they're in a closer span and they don't want their children to walk, and/or they don't want such a long ride on the bus, so can I opt for another stop?
Not the latter.
Okay.
It's because they're not eligible and
But they live too close.
they live too close.
Yeah.
Yep, they live too close, and so but they still need the transportation.
Okay.
So your board is, in its wisdom, has come up with a system that has worked really well.
Okay.
Mr. Dion?
Thank you. I just want to piggyback on that a little bit. So the numbers seem significantly higher in the opt-in program in middle school and high school. I mean, there's only, I think 4 kids in elementary school that are opting in. Is there any reason for that?
My guess is that in the elementary schools, the parents are just driving their students.
Okay. All right, and then the other question I had for you, there's been a tremendous amount of construction throughout the city, even into the late fall, which is rather unusual. How is that handled if that affects a bus stop?
In a number of cases, when that creates a hazard, under the policy, the definition of hazard is a construction site.
Right.
So when that happens, we will add a bus stop to wherever it is in comparison to the construction site. In other words, we wouldn't have a student walk if it's unsafe because of the construction. So we have had to make accommodations for that. And then when the construction is complete, then we go back to the way it was before.
So do you have I'm sure you have a communication channel with the Public Works Department to let you know when construction projects are happening and when they're ending?
Yes, we have a pretty good relationship with them so that they tell us way in advance that it's gonna start, so we can at least plan for it. And then when construction starts, we find out about it, and especially with Jeff Nielsen through the police department. Police department always knows about construction sites also. So we find out from both Public Works and from the police department, and we'll make adjustments as needed.
And if it's a state road, which I think there's only one that goes through Milford, right, New Haven Avenue? Or maybe there's multiple.
Yeah, New Haven Avenue, Bridgeport Avenue,
Yeah.
and Buckingham Avenue is one.
Is that through the police department you would find out about those?
Well, not always. That's a good point. From time to time, we don't find out about the state projects until somebody brings it to our attention that this is happening. It's funny that you say that because Calf Pen Meadow on the opening day of school, there was a blockage on Buckingham Avenue, a state road that we didn't know about. So we had to go down there and make sure that they didn't start construction until all the kids were through. And then after that, we made proper arrangements for it.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yes, Dennis.
Thank you. I actually don't know if this question is entirely relevant to this presentation, but I'm gonna ask it anyway.
Sure.
Because you mentioned Cap 10, and that got me thinking, because I remember last year, we heard a lot from parents and other people in the Cap 10 community, and I don't know if it was a configuration of the drop-off or a lot more parents were just driving their kids to the school, but I remember that a lot of people were complaining about the traffic jams, like around the school. Any update on that for this year?
I think you're referring to Orchard Hills.
Yeah, it was Orchard Hills.
Orchard Hills,
Yes,
yes.
it was Orchard Hills.
Yes, and we planned, we had money last year to do it, but we toured, in the summer, we only got one bid on the project. And the bid was extremely high from where we thought it was gonna be. And they couldn't guarantee that they would finish the project by the start of school. So we had to postpone it by a year. So that project is ready to go. We're gonna put it out to bid again in January. And then that will be done this summer. So there'll be, the Orchard Hills community will get, that'll be taken care of for next school year.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Irving?
I happened to be driving behind a non-Durham school bus and observed some children throwing things out the window and other behaviors. So I was wondering what the responsibility of the bus drivers or how they are responsible to respond to that. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Neil, do you wanna hit on that one?
Sure.
If anything like that ever happens on the local bus.
Never on our bus.
We take student management of the bus very seriously. The drivers do what they can to manage any type of unruly behavior on the bus. Of course, their first responsibility is to drive the bus safely, okay? If there's something going on in the bus where they need to pull over, they'll call dispatch and let them know what they're doing so they can gain control of the students on the bus. It doesn't happen very often, okay? As far as throwing things out of the bus, same thing. If they see a student doing that, or they hear of a student doing that, they'll pull the bus over safely somewhere, radio in, this is what I'm doing, and get control of the bus in the back. We'll also make notifications, they do student write-ups to the principals of the school, and then the principals almost always will call and ask us to download a video for them so they can actually see who did it and what was being done. Okay, so we try to handle it as quickly as we can, but the bus driver's responsibility, like I said, is to get that bus off the side of the road safely, make sure they're away from any type of, anybody's out of their danger zone, okay, and speak to the children on the bus. Okay?
Any other questions? I'm gonna follow up on that, what you just said.
Hi.
You said videotapes, all buses have videos on it, and how long are those videos preserved for?
I'm sorry, all buses do have videos on them, and how long is the video good for?
Yeah.
The video is probably good for a month.
Okay.
Okay, right now there's camera systems, one in the front of the bus, showing in the back, one in the back of the bus focusing forward. And we have the ability to download that. It takes a little bit of time, even with the technology, to get the bus back, take the hard drive out of the bus, download the video on a thumb drive, and get it to the principal. During COVID, we were doing it 14, 15 times a day. For contact tracing. But it can be done pretty quickly. I have 4 other employees besides myself that know how to do it, okay? And we do as quickly as we can. Okay?
Any other questions? Okay.
No
Seeing
questions
none.
on Plains Road?
Thank you so much.
All right, turn it over to Nick.
All right. Well, I don't know about you guys, but my bus driver had a big paddle right above the mirror. Never used it, but he threatened it a lot. So no cameras.
We don't do that.
No dispatching back saying, "Hey, I'm going to be pulling over." I don't think he wanted anybody to know what he was going to do.
We don't do that.
My name's Nick Voisart. I'm the Senior Director of Electric Vehicles for North America. I have to say that because they threw Canada at me too. So I cover quite a bit of territory. I've been with Durham since 2017. I've been in the school bus since 2009. I did business development for First until 2015, then came over to business development for Durham until I took on this role back in the spring. A little bit about me and how I do presentations. I walk around a little bit. I like questions, so feel free to just blurt things out. I do not cover every item on a slide. So if for some reason I skip over something that you wanted to hear more about or you had a question about, please, again, interrupt me and let me know. I've gotten used to seeing this, so I don't hit everything every time, so I do apologize for that. Here's the agenda for this evening. We're going to go through this at a reasonable pace. EV 101, I don't know what anyone in here knows about electric vehicles, who drives them, who doesn't, who's ever ridden one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure none of you have ridden an electric school bus, and I could be wrong. But if you have, great, congratulations. We're going to go over a couple different things on some of the technical terms, very high level, because I don't know the details. I have engineers on staff that know those things because I don't want to. If I did, I would have gone to school to be an engineer. Different types of electric school buses, same as our regular buses, but we'll go through that as well. Some high level things on funding, and then the challenges that we see throughout an EV implementation. All right. Let's start with the benefits. These are the good things. These are the reasons why we're having this conversation. As we all know, the joke I used the one time is I said, why did the school district get rid of its old diesel buses? Because they were exhausted. So, there's my dad joke for the evening. Right? I have 3 little kids. They hate them, but I still do them. All right, so this is zero tailpipe emissions. So that's a great benefit to this. As we all know, our tailpipes emit greenhouse gases and NOx and some terrible things that we don't want in our environment. So the more of these vehicles we can get off the road, the absolute better. They're ideal school buses, that is, for this type of application. So I look at, there's big 3 in my opinion. There's garbage trucks, mail trucks, and school buses. Fixed route, daily, local. Right? They get back to the lot, they can charge, they're predictable. prior to COVID and some of the driver shortage issues, which you all have had the opportunity not to have. So that's a great benefit to them. Lower overall maintenance. Right now, we're still diving into this, okay? There's a lot of things that we're not 100% sure on. Most of the manufacturers will tell us that it's about a 40% savings on maintenance. Right now, we're seeing about 20%. And the reason is that we're overly cautious, right? When we go into a facility like we would today, our maintenance techs are usually ratioed at 1 to 20, 1 to 25. Our manufacturers are telling us we should be able to go to 1 to 50. And as soon as we are in a place where we feel like it's making the most sense and our facilities are 100% EV, we can make that full transition. We'll see more savings from our operations. Another benefit of these vehicles is that they get cleaner as our grid does, all right? I think everybody here knows that. When we start using more solar and wind and wave power and who knows what else in the future, it's going to have a better impact on the total greenhouse gas emissions of the vehicle from manufacture all the way to disposal. And finally, they're safer. A lot of people don't think about these types of things when they think of an electric school bus, but they are safer. They are quieter. So getting back to things that happen on the bus, when it's loud and there's a lot of distractions, it's less safe for the driver. It's less safe for the kids. They're getting up, they're getting louder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's quiet, so the kids are more quiet most of the time. They also have a low center of gravity, so you think about all the weight of those batteries right in the middle of the frame, down low, less sway, less yaw in the vehicle. So really creates some safe features on the vehicle. Excuse me. Drawbacks of electric school buses. They are expensive. Show of hands, does anybody know how much an electric school bus costs? Anyone? Okay. Well, a regular diesel school bus costs between $90,000 and $100,000. An electric school bus can cost anywhere between $300,000 and $400,000. It's very, very expensive. I don't have an answer as to why. I'd love to tell you that the battery technology is expensive, and that is part of it. I think another part of it, to be brutally honest, is the fact that there are federal grants out there today that all these OEMs are happy to take the government's money, and so they're not getting price competitive on their vehicles. So it's unfortunately it's a catch-22, if you will, on that piece of the business. But the technology will get better, the prices will come down, which until then we'll obviously utilize as much of state and federal grants as we possibly can to get those vehicles on the road. There are maintenance challenges, as I mentioned before. The battery packs are heavy. We do not maintain those, so we have to have maintenance agreements with the OEMs that allow them to come in and maintain those portions of the vehicle. Today, almost all of our maintenance techs can do everything on the vehicle except pretty much, body work. Sorry, I had 7 C's before, so excuse me. Chowder was great, but it was a lot. Excuse me. There's a lot of anxiety around these vehicles as well. So range is a concern. There are multiple manufacturers out there, as we know. Some manufacturers build a bus with a battery pack that goes 75 miles. Others build them all the way up to 200 miles. There's a big cost related to that. But the benefit of that is that even though there's anxiety, we can design or we can purchase the bus based on the route design. So we know that you have urban routes that go 20 miles a day. You don't need the larger pack. You need a smaller pack, and that's fine. But we have to deal with some of the things that the drivers are still concerned with. I think Neil could tell you one of our things that we do is they're not allowed to let fuel today go beyond half tank, so that they're always prepared if something were to go wrong. With an electric school bus, if we designed it right, you should be pulling back on fumes. You should be coming in and have used all that power, because we don't want to put more power on the vehicle than what we have to. And the great thing is that there's technology out there designed to help with that. But again, it's anxiety that the drivers are going to have to deal with, that people around are going to have to deal with. One of the other things that came up in another presentation is someone said, well, we're dealing with driver shortages right now. Routes are being split up, and every day drivers call off and we're piecing a route together. So what happens when you've designed a route to fit a bus, and now that bus that you're wanting to put more time on can't do that? So we're still trying to figure out some of these things. You know, there's just little nuances, right? But we're not letting them get us down. You know, I feel like in some cases our society has gotten into this point where, you know, we always plan for like the worst case scenario. I'll give this example. I want to buy a Ford F-150. Now, I can't afford it, but I want to buy it specifically because the new one has the middle console that folds over and it's got a writing area. Now, I didn't know I needed that until they built it, you know? So now I'm planning in my head that I need to spend $80,000 on a vehicle that does this one thing when I can go out and buy one for $25,000 because I don't drive that much, you know, or what have you. So we have to get through some of those things, just, you know, thinking differently as a group, as a company, and overall with our teams. So just some things that we're working through on that side of it. All right, so let's go into a couple small things here. Kilowatts versus kilowatt hours. I'll spend a little time on the details in this slide because I need to read it. But a kilowatt or kW is the rate of electricity usage versus a kilowatt hour, which is the total amount of electricity used. So if I say that a school bus has 315 kilowatt hours, that means it can pull and it can discharge 315 kilowatts in an hour. That's a lot. As an example, a 315 kilowatt hour school bus is roughly 10 houses. So we applied for certain school districts, you know, up to 25 buses through the USEPA grant. That'd be a 250 room hospital, essentially, sitting on a site the size of the one that you have, you know, today. So I mean, it's a lot of power in one spot. You know, we run 300 lot yards. I mean, that's a 3,000, math right, 3,000, you know, room building on one site. So we've got to work with our utilities on that part of it. And that's just one of the things that we're learning as we go along. So this is another example of just how we look at range. So the manufacturer will tell us that their bus gets 1.58 kilowatts per mile efficiency on their largest range battery. So this is, for example, this is an IC bus. So IC has the largest battery pack in the business right now, 315 kilowatt hours. The smallest is Lion at 100 kilowatt hours. Excuse me. So, and Lion has 3 different levels, and a couple other manufacturers have different levels. But as you can see here, what we've done is we've looked at it and said, okay, very basically, if the route goes 37 miles in the morning, 37 miles in the afternoon, 74 miles, 1.58 gives us 116 miles, right? Nope, wrong. There are things that play into battery range, right? Auxiliary systems. I bet you $1 it gets cold here in the wintertime. I bet you $1 it gets a little warm in the summertime. And those things, those auxiliary systems pull power from the batteries. All right, so climate usage is going to play a big part in that. The way it's driven is going to play a big part in that. So the other piece that we have to do is we have to re-educate our drivers on how to drive these vehicles. It's a big golf cart. It still drives like a bus. It's much quicker. It doesn't have a transmission, so there's no shifting. Those things are, you know, kind of great. But again, they cannot accelerate quickly. They've got to be smart about how they manage their power. And the cool thing about most of these buses is that they almost turn that into a game. They collect all this data and they can share it with their friends. They can show that they, you know, this day they were 98% efficient as to how they're supposed to run their route, or they were 72, you know, or whatever it was. Like they can compare based on how they ran the route. The other thing that these vehicles do is regen braking. I'm sure everyone in here has heard of regen braking, but what regen braking is instead of braking, there's a component on the axle that pulls power as the vehicle's slowing through gravity back into the batteries, putting power back into the system, allowing extended range. So when we take those types of factors into account, we get power back. So we see in this particular slide, I haven't even gotten to the part about regen, excuse me. What the manufacturers are also telling us is that we should only charge them to 80%. These batteries are cranky and that we need to manage them well. So the systems that are in place do a couple things really well. They manage temperature, they manage the charge time, the charge speed. So a charge curve may look very quick. It may go up real fast and then it'll level off for the last 5% just to keep the battery happy so there's not too much heat being put on the battery. And again, they go to around 80%, 85% in order to kind of keep the battery happy, not overpower the battery, which causes some additional concern. then getting back to, looking at it from the regen braking piece, we can see that we put power back in, and we'll get to a place where we can at least have enough to run a 74-mile route. Now, I don't believe you have anything that goes 74 miles probably around here, do you? No, so that's not going to be a concern here. And again, what we do is we'll come in and we'll do route efficiency study, and we'll ensure that whatever we're putting on the road gets you from point A to point B without any issues. These are the, is there a question? Sorry.
That doesn't include sports, but that's just home field.
No, it does not, but I'll touch on that real quick. So sports trips, it's a great question. So there's two things here. One, in the future, and I say that, knowing that in the future this will happen, all school districts around here are gonna be electrified. So everybody has this concern that, I'm gonna drive 100 miles to, wherever, New Haven or wherever, to a tournament, an event, whatever, and I'm not gonna have enough juice to get back. Well, more than likely, they will have a charger that you can use while all the track team's doing their thing, or the football team, or the baseball team, or whatever. So I don't have much concern about that in the long term. In the short term, what you can do is opportunity charge. So you may have seen on the previous slide, there's something called opportunity charge. Now, one of the things that you deal with in the utility world, and this is still way up here for me, there's peak and off-peak billing, and there's also demand charges. So you can have an opportunity to charge at nighttime when the cost of power is low, and then you utilize your vehicle during the day when cost of power is high, and it's not going to be an issue. If you need to use the vehicle for something else and you have to charge during the day, you may pay more if you charge in the middle of the day. Now, I say that also knowing that in the future that won't be an issue. In California specifically today, it's cheaper to charge in the middle of the day than it is at nighttime. Why? Because they have so much solar power. So they take advantage of solar during the day. In Texas, it's cheaper to charge at night. In fact, they pay you to charge at night because they have these huge wind farms in western Texas, and nobody's taking power at night. So they're saying, please take the power, please take it, and they'll pay to have you take it off so that they can use it at a later time. So there's going to be some different things that will come up, some challenges through that. But in the interim, nobody's gone 100% EV yet. So you will still have diesel or gasoline vehicles in your fleet until, I believe, such time as everybody's ready for it. And case in point, it's 2022, so in 2035, that would be a 13-year-old bus. We run most of our buses between 12 and 15 years. So if we bought a new bus this year and it's a diesel bus, it will be the last bus we retire at some point in time. I mean, we're getting there that quickly, and we'll also have that amount of time to transition out of out of these fleets. All right. Vehicle range and charging. So here we go. We got the 3 basic chargers. So level 1, outlet at the house. That is not going to charge electric school bus for a couple of reasons. So I mentioned before that the battery has to be a happy battery. So there's a battery thermal management system on the vehicle which pulls power, and your home is not going to be able to do that. It just won't. Now, 220, if you had one in your garage, could, but no one's going to park a school bus in their driveway. Next, you have level 2 chargers. And the level 2 chargers have a pretty decent range. They go from, I believe, 14 to 15 kilowatts, and they can do what we would typically need to see in an electric school bus in overnight charging. The only challenge with level 2 is today they don't offer V2G. So V2G, which is vehicle to grid, is the opportunity to charge, again, at an off-peak time and disperse at a peak time for the utility. This is something that a school bus has the advantage of over anything else. During the summertime, when the air conditioners are running, if we partner with the utility, they could say, we want to charge these buses at nighttime, and then during the day, we want to pull power off to help offset the demand on our grid. And the school district can make money on that. So, excuse me, we're estimating right now that it's probably about $4,000 to $5,000 per bus, but it does depend on your location, what your utility charges, what kind of deal you can make in an interconnectivity agreement with your utility. The third one here, level 3 charger, those are the fast ones. Those things can do quite a bit. They can do anywhere from 50 all the way up to 350 in the way of charging. So you'll see in many cases the fast chargers are more inclined to be on your transit vehicles. I don't know if anyone's ever seen pictures of some of the transit vehicles that have these big overhead like panels, and they come down, they charge, and they'll do it in about 15-20 minutes. That's what those are in a lot of cases. You can obviously have it in a plug, but as you get higher and higher, it becomes pretty intense. Yes?
Just a quick question, so just typically, like in like the level 2 and level 3, how long does it take to charge a bus from, say, like 20 to 80%?
Yeah. So to charge a bus, again, depends on the size of the battery pack, right? So typically between 3 to 6 hours is about what you'll get. So we certainly shouldn't have any challenges whatsoever in most cases with buses getting back to the yard between 6 and 6:30, even after maybe a longer trip, 7 o'clock, and then sitting all night long and charging, and then being ready for the routes the next day.
Before you go on to the other stuff.
Yeah.
So you said earlier that an electric bus costs between $300,000 and $400,000 at initial cost, with lower maintenance of 40% theoretically in the future. There's got to be a curve at what point these two max and
Yes.
hit. At what point is that occur?
So it depends. And I say this all the time, and I'm very sorry. I wish I had a better answer. But we use total cost of ownership. So TCO is how we look at it. And we're betting that TCO is somewhere between $175,000 and $200,000 today.
On a bus, on a regular diesel bus over the life of a 15-year bus.
Yes.
Cost of diesel, maintenance included.
Yes.
Insurance, liability, any of those as well.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So we're still a little ways off, obviously. We're hoping that the improved technology is going to help in two different ways. One, it's going to extend range, which means less batteries, less weight. I mean, weight's the enemy in all of this. And then obviously lowering cost are really going to make that impact the most. The other thing that's going to help that is that in most TCO models, we assume the vehicle cost, the maintenance savings, the fuel savings, and then we also have to put in there the infrastructure cost, and then we also have to put in there the V2G savings. V2G and infrastructure are almost a wash, and there are companies out there that will guarantee that, which is really great. So I don't know if any of you have ever heard of a company called Highland Electric, and I'm not promoting them one way or another, but they're a turnkey electrification company, I guess is the right term. And what they do is their ownership started in energy arbitrage. So their big deal is they say we can put it on the infrastructure for free because we're betting on the utility markets, and that's great. They can do it. More power to them, and that helps obviously save costs. That'll help get TCO down. But they got to come in and do the same analysis anybody else is going to do, and we'll see how it all shakes out.
So, how we currently have our business relationship with you is we pay you a yearly per cost per bus.
Mhm.
Would it be the same sort of thing? Because from what I can understand from most of this system, which you're going to talk about more, is the federal government will pay for grants for that sort of thing. We would, as a district, we would not own these buses. We would continue in the same sort of system of that. And obviously, transfer of costs would occur at some level to us in that period of time. I don't really know if I have a question, or just more thought.
So the answer is yes. If the government, so today, the US EPA's rebate is up to $375,000 for what they're calling a priority district that has certain metrics, poverty metrics, rural metrics, etc. If you get the whole 375 and we spec a bus that costs less than 375, we will credit you for that diesel vehicle cost. So in our price you have today, there's a depreciation cost for our asset, right? So if we get more money than what we need, we will credit you back. We're not in this business to make a boatload on this. It's really just trying to get everybody to adopt. Now I'm a little frustrated with that whole EPA piece. I wish they wouldn't have gone so much on that because So the EPA released $500 million. They increased it to $1 billion because of interest. They got $4 billion worth of applications, 12,000 buses. The problem is that we don't know if it's somebody who said, I really believe in electric vehicles, or I want a free bus. So it really frustrates me because I really want to be able to go to my customers and have the ones that I know want to adopt and believe and are going to be advocates for moving this process forward. But, I don't know 100% who that is yet, so, but we'll continue to press on with that.
Is the communities in need in line with underserved community of like the EPA definition of that, or like a rural?
It's 20% poverty based on the SAIPE designation, or however they categorize that with, and I'm not 100% sure what that stands for, but, because they wanted, for example, I had Blackstone Valley, which I believe is somewhere in this area, Rhode Island, I believe, and they're not a public school, so they don't have a community designation based on the city in which they operate. They're a charter school. So they had to claim based on free and reduced lunch, which isn't really fair because we all know free and reduced lunch is much higher than what most of our communities have in the way of poverty level. So we'll see if they get something, but there was this whole big debate about that throughout the EPA's process.
And then the last question is, I believe I saw that Connecticut DEP is also offering state grants through their infrastructure funds through that. Where is that kind of fall on that in a state level? Is there, like, does one preempt the other, or anything?
They're stackable.
Okay.
So if I went for EPA grants and then I want to go for DEP, I can, and I'm allowed to stack those things on top of each other. At the end of the day, the EPA grant pays for up to $375,000 of a Type C, $285,000 of a Type A, which is the short vehicles, and $20,000 toward your utility cost or your infrastructure. If for some reason we wanted to go and look at more, we obviously can. Let's say in the next round Milford goes and they don't hit that the priority designation. There's lower buckets or tiers, so we could go and apply for other grants through other programs, and also some of the utilities like National Grid. I know they have some programs out there for infrastructure costs and helping to reduce that. The other benefit you all have is obviously this is more of a suburban area. I have school district customers who are very rural, and there's no way I'm going to be able to get the amount of power they need out to that site without some major improvements, and the utilities aren't willing to do that right now. So there are quite a few challenges on that side of it at the moment. It's I was at a conference earlier actually the end of this last week, they kind of bleed together, and a representative from National Grid came in, and it was from New York, and she was asked, she said, well, did the state of New York discuss with you their timeline, the 2027 no more diesel purchases, the 2035 all zero emission vehicles on the road with you before making this decision? No, not at all. And so unfortunately there's, what do they say, 8,000 megawatts of power that they've got to come up with by 2035. Long Island is 4,000 megawatts of power on its own, so that tells you, what they need, and it's a lot. So.
Mr. Wizard, I'm imagining the board's gonna want to ask lots of questions toward the end of your presentation,
Yeah.
particularly on how it impacts Milford Public Schools.
Of course.
And I see you have some very technical slides. I wonder if we could zoom through those.
Yes.
And get to some of the,
Yeah,
what about Milford?
these are
Yes.
more just information for you, just some different types of chargers.
Thank you.
These are the types of buses that are on the road today, so just some of the different manufacturers and their different ranges. And if you didn't know, a Type C and a Type D just kind of gives you an idea of those types of vehicles out there. The reason that the Type A slide doesn't have the same information is because the Type A's are still somewhat of a unicorn. They're out there, but the information on them is not quite as robust. They're using kind of parts from here, parts from there. They're not as well put together as the Type C's and Type D vehicles, but they are making good strides. All right, state, federal laws and funding. So this is just kind of a map to show where we see the most state funding. So that's what the map is showing. in the way of a heat map. And then you have the two major federal programs listed here, the US EPA, which we were just discussing, $5 billion in total over 5 years. They released $1 billion now, obviously to date, and they're going to continue to release those funds. We just had the IRA program release, which is going to have another $1 billion towards the program. We don't know exactly how that's going to come out yet, plus some additional little funds here and there. There's also still some monies out there from the Volkswagen mitigation program from years ago that are getting used for different things. So we'll start, turn over every stone we can as we continue to go through this. All right, the last slide here. Challenges in EV implementation. So again, cost we discussed, real estate. So I haven't seen the new facility yet, but in most cases, real estate's going to be a big challenge. How the vehicles are parked, where it's located, are going to be big issues. How it's parked, obviously, is because it's not a fuel tank that sits to the side. Vehicles pull up, they charge, they move on. Every vehicle has to have a charger. So it's got to be set up. I mean, you've seen the charging stations in parking lots and in malls and things like that. It's going to have to be very similar to that and how they're designed and set up. We discussed the infrastructure and what's going to be the issues there, power availability and things of that nature. Contract terms, so this is more on a couple different things. It's the real estate side, so us and our lease terms with the landlord, since we don't own the property, and then obviously our relationship with you all. So if I have, in the case of the EPA rebate, they require that you have that vehicle operate for the customer for at least 5 years. So we have to make sure that we have those conversations about if your laws don't allow it, so Massachusetts, let's say, doesn't allow 5-year contracts, they're 3-year contracts. Well, then we have to make sure we have an agreement in place that says, if we lose it, we'll give you the vehicle, and so on and so forth. Range, we talked about range. Maintenance, we talked about maintenance. And then quality, again, getting back to why we still have the mechanics on staff, the V2G piece we talked about only being on level 2. Thermal events. So I don't know if anybody saw, I think it was 2 or 3 months ago, there was a transit bus in Connecticut. It was a new flyer that caught fire. So a thermal event on an electric bus is much different than it is on a diesel bus. It happens faster, it is more dangerous, they do not go out. So there's nothing we can do. Today every diesel bus we have has something called fog maker on it, which is a fire suppression system. Wouldn't do anything for an electric bus. The good thing is these don't happen most often, but they don't happen very often in operation. Like if there's ever a thermal event, they usually happen when it's being charged. So they're very seldom. But when they do happen, it's very hot. There's 2 different stages. The first is a gas release. So there are some pretty gnarly gases in these batteries. And when they get hot, they burst on the side and these gases come out, and then the vehicle catches fire. So we're still working through some of the different things on how we design our safety programs around those. But again, knock on wood, there have not been any school bus fires. They've been operating for 8 years now in most cases. We have some that have been in White Plains since 2018, no issues, but we are making sure we are aware that can happen. And then useful life. Our OEMs are telling us that this is going to last 15 years or this is going to do this. And we don't have real world data on that. We have 6 years here, 5 years here, but we're not 100% sure if what they say is going to hold true. The powertrain itself, so the battery motor, that thing will last forever. These things are running, conveyor belts in factories for years or whatever. They're bulletproof. It's the batteries that are the question mark still. So we'll see what happens in those certain instances as we go forward. All right, questions?
Any questions? Mr. DeYoung?
Thank you. This was really helpful, very informative, so thank you. There's probably like 1,000 questions to ask, but I'll just start with, I have 2 that relate to our current fleet. So do you have a sense as to how many buses in the next 5 years, let's say, that we're gonna have to replace with either diesel or electric?
I don't. So I didn't go and do an analysis yet, but it's a very simple process. It boils down to your adoption curve. So I can go back and I can look at the age of the vehicles and I can say, over the next 5 years, you're gonna replace 5 next year, 7 the year after, 8 the year after. But depending on where the school district is with regard to how they want to handle costs or how we can, get grants is going to really dictate, what that is. I know we have a certain deadline we got to get to, but we can't force the issue because the costs will just drown us on either side.
Sure. So what is our annual replacement number of buses that need to be replaced every year now?
I can talk to that.
Yeah.
We have it in the contract, and it specifically lists which buses we have to replace. We're currently running on anything over 10 years
Okay.
that we replace. This year, we replaced 9. We thought it best to replace some of these special ed buses. We talked about that earlier, that we hadn't gotten them. We got our 4 buses in, they're being outfitted now. We replaced 5 big buses. Next year, we are gonna schedule it per contract to replace 8 more. Those will all be special ed buses, because we have, right now, a very new fleet as far as big bus goes, okay?
Very new fleet?
Very new fleet.
Okay.
Okay, we just replaced, last year, I believe it was 9 or 10 big ones, the year before that, another 9 or 10 big ones, so we have a new fleet.
And we have
as far as large buses go.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
I'm sorry.
We have, 67? I forget what was in the
We have
budget.
62 routes. Right now, we
Right.
have 74 buses.
74 buses,
Yeah,
and
we
that
have-
includes special ed.
That includes special
spares.
Okay, that includes some vans. We have, and built into the contract is a spare factor of 10%. We have a little over that. Don't tell my bosses that right now. I hang on to a lot of buses in case we need them. So that's where we're at right now with that.
Okay,
And don't let that be the deciding factor. So
Sure.
at the end of the day, let's say the next couple of years we have to buy new ICE vehicles, like combustion vehicles.
yeah,
Because we are such a big company, if you said that you want to transition to electric and you have the opportunity to do so, we can cascade those assets out somewhere else.
Okay.
We'll keep putting them to use. That's not going to be an issue for us.
okay. One other question, sorry, that's another question. One other question, so we recently finished our transition to solar on all of our buildings. Is there any cross-pollination that could potentially happen between the two?
Yes, so that would be a conversation with the utility that we'll have to find out how much power they're pulling, to see if there is the opportunity to put that power to use with the electric school buses.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So the special ed buses are full, long, or are they vans, or they're half and half?
I'm sorry?
Size of the special ed buses,
Size of the
size
special,
of them, yeah.
size of them, they're between 21 and 24 passenger.
So this is the Type A's of the small.
Type A
Okay.
buses,
Yeah.
they're small ones. Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Souza?
Thank you. So you mentioned that with the real estate being one of the challenges, does the new yard at Plains Road, was the, the site parkability, all these concerns, was that taken into account? Or would that need to be, I don't know what this question is either. Or no?
No.
Okay,
We'll have to look at that. That's not to say that it's not gonna happen, but,
yeah,
I don't know how it lays out for parking.
Electric fleet was not taken into account when we
okay,
leased that property.
okay.
And that lease, I'm sorry, that lease is 3 years?
The lease on the new property?
Yeah.
10 years.
10 years, okay.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question of where on Plains Road is it?
Very end of Plains Road. You know where?
Yeah, my parents live on Plains
Tiberius
Road.
Beer Company is?
Yeah.
Raton, Plains Road?
Yeah, my parents live on Plains Road.
Right, that
So,
building,
all the way to
the
the end.
building that's been recently, the parking lot's been recently striped. It's got a brand new exterior and nobody's living there yet.
It's next to the beer company? Is it
There's a beer company right down the street, Tiberius Beer.
Yeah,
It's
I
not a
know.
bad thing at all.
It's next to the
I haven't
power
been there
company.
yet, but I just took it right.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Ms. On?
You mentioned that there's less information available about Type A, maybe the technology isn't there yet. Does it make more sense to start replacing the larger buses and wait for the Type A?
Yes, so the challenge with Type A, again, gets back to weight. So, all the Type A's have to be the larger chassis, dual rear wheel, and the amount of battery packs that you can put on them are much less, obviously, than a big bus. So, while they weigh less overall, because they're a smaller vehicle, they get less range. So that still is a challenge out there. So we would certainly start with the larger vehicles first. Plus, from a cost standpoint, it makes more sense, the delta between the type A electric and type A gas versus a type C diesel and a type C electric is much different, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
You mentioned, weight planes, that you've had them in, the fleet for, what, 8 years, you said?
Since 2018, so
2018,
6 years.
so 6 years, okay.
Yes.
So what lessons would you take from that implementation that you would transition to us if we were to do this type of thing?
There are a lot of lessons there. So they were first generation line electric buses. They get 65 miles worth of range, so they're very limited on what they can do. When they first came on site, they did not have V2G capability. It was added at a later time, which is great. We know that they can add technology at a later time. We had some challenges with charging. It wasn't the vehicle's fault. It was Con Edison's fault, because they paid for all the charging infrastructure, and their caveat was that they wanted to do V2G and they wanted to be able to test V2G. So we had a couple events there that were lessons learned on when we can charge them, how to manage the heat on the vehicles. The manufacturer, Lion, made a lot of great findings and also did a really exceptional job of staying on top of any of those challenges and helping our mechanics get educated in some of those things. We learned that people can get very afraid of it very fast. So we had an arc event early on where they went to do a handshake and it arced, which is not supposed to happen. And I don't personally know why, but the mechanic that was doing it, he said he'll never touch an electric bus again. So I'm sure there's some reasoning behind there that someone had. Again, that's never happened on any of their other fleet, at least is what they told us, and I believe them. So there's obviously what he was doing differently. He could have been, at that moment, he could have been mad at it and jammed it in there too hard, or done something else, right? So we just don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's been a great learning experience for us, for sure.
From a cost perspective, obviously the grants are a great thing, right? It's helpful to get up and running. What if you had to do it without the grants? What would be your rollout? I know you haven't done all the studying and everything like that. I know you would want to do that, but if you could just ballpark what the budgetary impact would be for us to implement this outside of grants.
If I had to come in here tomorrow and electrify a bus with no grants, it would cost me another $325 per bus per day. So I don't know what your rates are today. Do you do per bus per day rates here today?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you build today, every time a bus goes out, the rate is based on per bus per day. So I would assume it's somewhere around that $300. It's almost double
Okay.
to do that. And that's strictly based just on the amortization cost of the vehicle and the infrastructure.
But it wouldn't be the same if you only did one bus, right? That would be to roll out all of the buses.
That's
Over a
if
period of time.
on volume it'd be different. So
Okay.
I only have a number right now on the small
single
amount,
bus.
because nobody's really done hey, I want to see my whole fleet.
Right.
Everybody's saying I want a onesie twosie here, or I've had a couple say 10 to 20, and we would look at economies of scale based on that. I mean the biggest piece there. I mean the vehicle side right now, like I said, we're not getting any volume discounts from the manufacturers, but on the infrastructure side, certainly as you only have to dig a trench once, right?
Right,
So
sure.
the more you put in that conduit, the more you do on the front end, the cheaper it is overall.
All right.
Last question I have.
I'm sorry, Ms. Doyle.
That Adam just brought up a good point is, are there issues of getting the buses? Is there a time frame, or is it how quickly?
There's an issue with getting everything. Right now, even on a diesel bus, a gas bus, electric bus, we're at about 10 months. That's what the OEMs are telling us to be able to get a new vehicle. So I mean, if I bought one today, I'm still gonna have a hard time having it ready for the first day of school. But the bigger lead time is the infrastructure side. Getting the chargers isn't a problem. Getting the switchgear, meter sockets, and some of the other things that the utilities use is taking 52 weeks to 18 months. So it's really a big challenge. And Hurricane Ian didn't help, because now they're all trying to pull everything they can down there to get all the power and everything back up in those areas, and it's been causing some more supply chain issues.
Any other questions? Mr. Fowler?
Thank you. So how much does it actually cost to replace an electric bus battery compared to one?
Great question. Don't know.
Don't know.
And here's the other exciting thing though. So getting back to the whole thing is as we go through this process and as time goes on, it's going to get better. I mean, look at the TVs around here. I mean, this thing right here probably 10 years ago cost $5,000. Tomorrow it's probably going to cost $500. And I know that's not an accurate statement, but as the technology gets better, it's going to get cheaper. But the other piece of it is that we're really looking at, but the manufacturers are looking at how they replace cells. So the whole battery doesn't go bad, right? So a battery pack cells about 4 times the size of a AA battery, right? They pack those into modules, and those modules under packs, and those packs go into the bigger packs which go underneath the bus. So over time what happens is those certain cells start to die down, and that's how you get degradation. So they're looking now at how they open it up, take the welds off, pull those particular batteries out, identify those batteries, pull those batteries out, and then replace it and put a refurbished battery back on the vehicles. The other piece of it is second life battery packs. So today, a lot of the charging infrastructure companies are looking at these big containers that they can sit on site that have second life batteries, Tesla batteries, Panasonic batteries, LG batteries, all the different batteries they can, and they use them as auxiliary charging. So a great example would be, let's say we came into Milford and I needed a megawatt of power to power all your vehicles. But the utility said, well, I can only deliver 800 kilowatts. So what I would need to do is bring a battery pack on site that could give me that other 200, charge when the buses are charging, and then charge when the buses aren't charging, and then charge the buses while the others are charging at the same time to kind of level off that demand. So there's some other opportunities for those batteries at the end of the life cycle, which also is a question mark, is residual value. We don't know exactly what the residual value is on an electric school bus yet, because we don't know what they're willing to value those batteries at. But great question.
Thanks.
They've all been great questions, by the way.
Mr. DeYoung?
So, at the risk of putting Mr. Rizzitelli on the spot, where do you stand on this, and what would be our process if we were to think about doing this?
We would need some time to answer that, Mr. DeYoung.
That's fair.
Really not probably a good way to get an answer from us.
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
That probably
If
is
you
like a
could-
whole other meeting.
all right, if I'd be interested in that.
It certainly would not be through the budget proposal process in January.
Sure, no, I understand.
We need a lot more time to develop that plan.
Any other questions? Mr. Fowler?
One more. I remember seeing this in the news not that long ago, and I just have it up that apparently Connecticut might phase out the sale of gasoline-powered cars by 2035. Has Durham Bus Company, or I don't know, looked into the future yet and how to replace those buses and how to what maybe the budgetary impact
Yes.
might be?
So
on the school
two
district?
things. One, so as a company, and I left that slide out, so I apologize. We are set our goal at 2035 to be zero emission fleet. So I have 18,000 school buses that I have to get transitioned over to electric by 2035. No pressure. So there's a heavy lift there, but I believe the adoption curve is going to go rather quickly once we reach cost parity. So we've looked at that obviously extensively in New York with our New York customers, because they set 2027 for no longer being able to buy them, and then 2035 for not being able to operate any more diesel vehicles. So we've got a pretty aggressive plan on our own, which will align with that.
All right.
Any other questions? Ms. Ryan?
Thank you. So how are some other states doing, since you mentioned Connecticut, like California? Yep.
See, now that's the one that you would think, like, okay, California has, all the incentive to go and do it quickly. And today, California has 27,000 school buses on the road, like all buses, and they have about 600 electric buses. So today, the adoption is still very low, and it is a cost thing. And getting grants takes time. So if we worked on getting a grant for anything here, there's a timetable behind that. Then once we get it, then we've got to do a site analysis and assess everything and make sure that we're on par to get it in. I would venture to guess that we'd be rolling buses off mid 2023, 2024 if we started today. So they're working hard at it, but again, they also have a very unreliable grid right now, unfortunately. So that's kind of made them once bitten, twice shy. So we'll see, but I mean it's been big there. Washington State's been starting to get a little more aggressive in it. Illinois is looking at it pretty heavily. Texas, surprisingly, again because they have such cheap energy, it's been something they've been considering, and then obviously New York. I've been to Rhode Island a couple times, but the Midwest states in the middle where I live in Ohio and stuff, they're still happy with their gas and diesel buses at the moment, but we'll see what happens.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
And yes, I'm a Bengals fan, so.
Can I
I'm
just
sorry.
follow up on that last piece there?
What, the
So you're
Bengals fan?
saying- If we made a decision today, yeah, we're going, it takes up to 2 years to implement, from start to finish. Grants, infrastructure, getting a vehicle, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's with the current supply chain issues. It's gonna
Okay.
take at least I would say at most 2 years at
Okay.
most.
Thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions?
Ms. Petrosky, if I may?
Yes.
I do understand that this has been for some point of interest on the board. But I hope that you could see that there's a lot that goes into replacing our buses. And it's not just a Milford Public Schools work. It is something that we're gonna have to work with our city and our state. This is not something that we could just roll out through our regular budget or our CIP, and this is a big lift. And I'm afraid it's gonna triple, if not quadruple, our budget in this area. And not just the bus contract. I'm talking about Plains Road and infrastructure there, and that's not the only place where they can charge, and what happens when they get on our campuses, and there's just, I think, a multifaceted plan here that can't be rushed, and I believe that, sometimes when the first version of the technology is released, if you hear this rule of thumb, don't buy the first version. Let the first version go out, let the kinks be worked out, and then buy like V2, right? I think that there is this generation of electric buses that will only get better in technology. And hopefully, fingers crossed, the costs will start to come down as you were suggesting, right? So there's a little bit of like, let's wait and see and plan at the same time and see what the state and the city can do in partnership with us. So we commit to looking at this and sitting down and creating a long-term plan. It can't just be something that, how fast can we buy an electric bus is not on our list, just so you know. It's how fast can we create a plan for that, what's this year, 22? Yeah, 13 years from now, that we can roll this out. So that's our commitment.
And you make a great point. I mean, and I hope that I haven't come off as like a
Salesman?
as an anti-EV person, because I try to make sure I'm very clear about the positives and the challenges, because there are a lot of challenges, and I don't want anybody to think that it is roses, and I don't want anybody to think that it's going to be an easy road, because it does take a lot of work. And to your point, the iPhone was not the first smartphone, but it certainly is the best. You learn a lot from those first generations, and we're seeing a lot of that today. So I think that's one of the other reasons why the EPA is giving so much money away, because they know that these vehicles are still young in their use in their life, and they don't want school districts getting something that may be a challenge to them. They want to give them the opportunity to get something for free, so they don't feel as slighted if things don't go perfect. So,
Well,
So
EPA is funding R&D right now.
I'm sorry.
They're basically funding R&D.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? They're getting
Yes.
money out there so that companies can be incentivized to develop the technology.
Yes.
I don't think it's ready for Milford Public Schools to wholesale replace 62 buses in 2 years. So I think we need to let the technology grow, let the legislators figure out how they're gonna help school districts pay for it, and gives us as a city time to look at what we can do together. So I think it's in our future, but I just don't know how soon.
I'm not sure we could do a plan in 2 years.
Fair point.
I mean,
We could certainly have a plan, but that plan might be that you're getting your first
Changing.
vehicles.
Right,
Yeah,
but to
yeah.
get that whole plan, to me, you know, I have a little bit of a tech background, just the infrastructure itself is a very large lift, especially as there's a new site that we don't even have any idea if it's even capable at this point.
Right.
Right, so the site was purchased with one path in mind. Switching paths can be a challenge.
The only question I would ask is that if you do have interest in the technology, to at least consider being part of a pilot, you know, maybe doing 3 or 4. You have enough spare buses that you could do that, and we could even bring in some additional spares to offset any concerns. That way you do have that opportunity to see them in action. You can even illustrate to the community that you are moving things forward, and you know, it does help everybody, you know, all tides raise ships, or what's that saying they say, you know.
Would you just offer that to us for free?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'll get all the EPA grants, and if it's for free,
If you could give it to us for free, we'll pilot some.
okay, that's what I like to
And
hear.
that's on TV and
Yes.
recorded.
Yes, yes.
Name
Yes,
spelled
Mr. Webb.
V-O-I-S-A-R-D.
VOISARD, middle name Paul, address.
My only comment is, at no point are we purchasing any buses. These buses never belong to us.
Correct.
They are always Durham buses. We are contracting to take from you, so that doesn't mean that we don't have multiple infrastructure needs and concerns at that level to move toward. But I do think we had already once this year had a conversation about purposeful play, taking 10 years to get into our school district. So we have to have these conversations.
Yep.
So that in 10 years, we can be ready to be rolling out 62 electric buses. And so, I'm almost done with a master's in electrical and sort of this stuff.
So you know most of that. You want a job?
You wanna give me the job, baby? I'll take it. But like, we have to move there, because otherwise we're gonna be left in it. It doesn't mean that we have to do it tomorrow, but, you know, we have to start this conversation of, you know, we're talking about $600 a day for a bus. We can't afford that. As a city, we can't afford it, but if we can at some point bring the cost to $375, you know, that's a reasonable lift. So in my mind, I think this is a useful conversation for long-term planning. And where are we doing new buildings and conversations of, you know,
Absolutely. Yeah,
What
the
happens
dialogue is needed.
to do from there. So, thank you, I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm happy to have come in and done this.
Any other
Thank you so
questions?
much.
Nick, thank you very much.
Thank you, it really
Thank
was
you.
very helpful to get us started on this.
Yes, thank you.
We'll move on to Dr. Kutaya for policy.
If I could just take a moment to publicly recognize Neil and Durham Bus Company. Neil, you guys were tremendous all throughout the pandemic. You rose to the occasion, you're always there, whether it was Saturday night at 6 p.m. and we needed a bus tape, you guys were running to the bus trailer, I think it's a trailer, office, I'll call it the office. So thank you. Just really, every time there was a new twist on the pandemic, you guys just responded in the best interest of kids. So I want to publicly say thank you from Milford Public Schools to all of you and our bus drivers. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much, I really appreciate it, and I'm gonna relay that message back to my staff, who probably did most of the work on all of that, so I'll make sure that gets back to them. Thank you very much.
Well, I remember a couple Sunday night phone calls to, I'll call Neil. Right, Jim?
Oh, yeah.
I'll call Neil.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Thank you. So we'll move on to policy, yes?
Yes,
Thank
please.
you. And gentlemen, don't feel like you have to stay for policy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Actually, the first policy is about bus drivers, but
Is it?
I'm gonna turn things over for the first policy to Jim Riccitelli.
All right, thank you. Yes, the policy 4212.42, drug and alcohol testing for school bus drivers.
Okay.
This is, this is a new policy. We currently do not have a policy on the books, but we are required to by, I'm not sure if it's federal law or state law. So this was, by both federal and state. And so this policy will put us in compliance. It puts the responsibility of all of the testing on the contractor. However, it puts the responsibility for us to verify it. So each year, We will come up with regulations of how we get the verification from the contractor that they're in compliance with this policy for drug and alcohol testing for the bus drivers.
And I'm sorry, I stand corrected, I think it's just federal.
Okay. And I
Federal
should,
code 49.
and I should say, we talked to Durham and they assured me that they are in compliance now with all of these requirements.
Okay. Any questions? Comments? Ms. Doyle?
The first paragraph, in reading it, it says drug and misuse of alcohol by drivers of commercial vehicles. I think that language leaves open to interpretation, commercial vehicles of any that we contract with, when this document applies only to school bus drivers. I know the next part of the sentence has to do with, transportation contractor, but is that also applicable to other commercial vehicles that deliver things or things like that? I think that sentence leaves room for interpretation.
We'll double check.
Any other comments, questions? No? Okay, seeing none?
Thank
Move
you.
on.
We'll move on to 5141.4, which is reporting of child abuse, neglect, and sexual assault. I'll just review the changes for the board, and if you have any questions, we'll have to take them tonight or the next meeting. So the first paragraph is simply, the third paragraph that has been struck has been moved up. We felt like that was an introductory statement, regarding the, legal obligations of, mandated reporters. So that first paragraph is similar to the third, we just moved it up. Made some additional changes on this first page. Second paragraph stating that the mandatory requirement for reporting is based on the person's status as a student rather than his or her age. So as long as they are a student of Milford Public Schools, we are mandated reporters. Moving on to the next page. Some changes from this point on are referred to the electronic nature of reporting. DCF in the last few years made it much more easily accessible for mandated reporters to place a report. Sometimes you were calling and you found yourself on the line waiting, sometimes no exaggeration, hours. So in cases that are not of a non-emergent situation, that a care line was added and that individuals can call and leave a message, or it can be reported electronically online. So there's a form where mandated reporters can complete, and it is the same as calling it in. And that same change is made on the next page, 3 or 4, as well as the paragraph that states that the district must annually distribute the mandated reporter policy electronically to parents and guardians. And a copy of those guidelines are identified for parents to consume. And that is done through our sign-off at the beginning of the year, where parents have to sign off on all those items before they can get their child's schedule or teacher. And then there's just an update on page 5 of the legal references.
Are there any questions? Ms. Irby?
On the change for reporting based on the person's status as a student rather than their age, can you remind me how that, if you report, if I'm thinking about my mandated reporter training, if it's based on the mandated reporter training is based on the student's age, isn't it? Or is it not? When I'm calling for, to report on a student, I'm looking at I'm trying to picture the paths. Yeah. Is it?
I think you're still reporting age. Is that what you're asking?
Right, so you're still reporting age, so isn't age more important than being a student, or?
This is stating that our obligation is to a child's status as a student of ours, not necessarily their age.
But it follows the same reporting process? So if it goes to, children's services, or because you're 21 or something, it's going to the police department, it will split on the tree or the reporting process where appropriate.
So your question is,
Does it still fall in does it still fall within mandated reporting if it's a student? If it's not by age?
So are you asking that the
You know,
form
Chris?
itself requires that it is under
Yeah.
a certain age?
And it could just because I'm not
Mr. Brown
100%
is
sure.
he's gonna be my
We,
call friend.
We would report to DCF if a student came forward and said they were being abused, or if we suspected abuse or neglect. We could have a senior who's 18. We'll call the DCF care line and make that report. Sometimes DCF will tell us the child is too old, or say a 19-year-old senior, and will direct us to also contact the police department. For students with disabilities who have intellectual disabilities, sometimes DCF will direct us to contact a section of DDS, the Department of Disability Services, for our students who can be as old as 22 but have those level of disabilities. But as a school district, we're mandated reporters to contact DCF initially and then see if they tell us to make a report to an additional agency.
Then we'll branch off to cover them. Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Doyle?
This whole policy is about any child abuse, neglect, or sexual assault that appears to have occurred to a child, rather?
Yes.
Okay, so the first sentence says, suspected child abuse and neglect or reports of sexual assault by an employee. That by an employee reads as if we are only recognizing the legal and ethical obligations to report sexual assault by employees.
Well, broadly, sexual assault would fall under the broader umbrella of abuse.
Right, but it's saying sexual assault by an employee, so if an employee assaults a child, then it needs to be reported, but it's not broad enough. Like, we should be, as a district, we want to report, and the board wants to recognize its legal and ethical obligations in reporting suspected child abuse and neglect or reports of sexual assault against a student to be filed with applicable state agencies. The by an employee is referring only, like, we
I
don't
think
have
that's
an
poorly
obligation.
worded.
Yes,
I
that's what
think
mean.
it's reporting by an employee, not abuse by an employee.
I could see a sentence,
See? I
second,
think it's poorly worded, right?
yes, it's a,
It's our obligation
to do all
in
of those
reporting
things.
by an employee of abuse of a student, not abuse by an employee on a student, so we'll look at
That
Good
same thing is in the next paragraph as well.
That's a major catch.
It's in a few different places if you would review that as well.
Okay.
I think it should be two sentences, is that we have a legal and ethical obligation to report these things. An employee also is a mandated reporter in that sense. But that was my first takeaway on the reading.
That same thing. Anyone else, any questions? I had that same issue, and then I just had a couple of minor things, but the implementation on page 2 of 6, the electronic reports, I just had a question on the note where it says mandated reporters reporting electronically when they reasonably suspect that a child has been abused, neglected, or placed at risk of imminent harm in a non-emergent situation. And it seems a bit contradictory to be in a risk of imminent harm in non-emergent. If you're at risk of,
well, the word
Imminent
imminent
harm, I
is a
would-
contradiction to non-emergent, right?
yeah, well, if you're at risk of imminent harm, that should be an emergency. Yeah?
I just wanna make sure that's not the exact language from the statute.
Okay.
Okay, so if it is, we need to carry it over, if it isn't, we'll ask council for some synonyms.
Okay. I mean, if it's not, even just taking out imminent probably would work.
we'll look at
Okay,
the statute.
and that's all I had. Okay, I think that's it. No other questions?
Okay, last policy, sexual abuse prevention education program 5145.511. The change happens on page 2, where the mandatory training for all school districts, those categories of training are updated based on updated statute. So you'll see letters A through H, which is an extended version of the original language, which only had 2 items in its training criteria. So you'll see it ranges from warning signs of sexual abuse to understanding, once again, the mandated reporting requirement, prevention, identification, training programs for bystander and appropriate interaction with children, understanding district policies on abuse and misconduct, reminding staff members to maintain professional relationships with students, training on available resources for children affected by abuse or misconduct, and any appropriate follow-up and care for abused students as they return to our school settings. And that's the extent of changes in this policy.
Any questions, comments? Seeing none, I actually have one thing on this, on page 3 of 4, where it talks about the second to last paragraph, an oral report by telephone or in person. Can we make that a little bit more consistent with the reporting paragraph on page 2 of the prior policy? On page 2 of the prior policy, when it talks about reporting, it talks about to the Commissioner of Children and Families. This is a little bit worded a little differently. Can we just make those consistent? And the Superintendent of Schools,
take a
and then the
look at it,
Department of
okay?
Children and Families, just,
Yeah, we'll take a look at it.
okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Seeing none. Is there anybody here for public comment? If so, I will just read the rules for public comment. Speakers may offer objective comments about school operations and programs. The board encourages speakers not to express personal complaints or defamatory comments about the Milford Board of Education personnel or any person associated with the Milford Public School System. Security issues and matters relating to negotiations, grievances will not be permitted. Consistent with the principles of the Federal Education Right to Privacy Act, discussion of students is prohibited absent parental waiver. Public comment does not allow for two-way conversation between speakers and the board. We welcome and appreciate your comments and opinions, and all will be taken into considerations. Please note our meetings are televised and live streamed on YouTube. We ask that you state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Public comment is limited to the agenda items only. Is there anybody? Seeing no one, we will move on.
Ms. Petrosky, can I have a moment of privilege, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. We, as a leadership team, want to recognize the contributions of Ms. Betsy Ratner. Ms. Ratner, you have been a voice and of reflection for us. During some of our toughest times, it was nice to receive little encouraging emails from you, letting us know that we were doing a good job and just keep up the great effort. And even during times of celebration, you were right there along with us, cheering us on and celebrating together. I am so grateful for your voice of advocacy for all children. And one thing I'll always remember about you is that how you fight a good fight with all of your heart. Like anytime there was something that you were so excited about, I knew it was your entire body celebrating. Right? It wasn't just. Yeah, right. So on behalf of Milford Public Schools, we're grateful for your time of service on this board, and we will miss you terribly. So congratulations on your next endeavors.
Thank you. I'd like to say, if I have a few moments, if I could have that privilege for just a moment, that the creative and critical thinking and the problem-solving, decision-making journey with all of you at the meeting has been an absolute delight, and the collaboration of such like-minded individuals so intellectually coming through with your thoughts and processes to make the school system the best that it can be, and I am just so proud of Milford. So thank you, thank you, thank you all. It's been delightful.
Thank
I'll miss you.
I will also throw myself on behalf of the board, a moment of privilege as well, to thank you from all of us. I think it's very clear that we all have appreciated all of your contributions, your enthusiasm, your insights, and we are going to miss you terribly.
Thank you.
Seeing nothing else, do we have a movement to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. At 8:40.
Never been here. Never.
8:42.